Hello, hello, hello. This is Chris Ferdinandi from GoMakeThings.com. And today we are going to be building an app using nothing but vanilla JavaScript and vanilla web components. So I've got this empty document here. I just have this empty pick at random element. And the way this is going to work is when our web component loads, we are going to inject a form into the DOM that lets users add items to a list and then pick one of them at random. You might use this to pick who has to drive, or pick which food you're going to eat, or which song you're going to play next. Any sort of thing where you want to be able to pick something at random, this is the app for you. This was actually a project that a friend of mine suggested to me easily like 8 or 9 years ago that he used to use to evaluate different libraries and frameworks. And it's been quite a few years since I've built it. I've never tried to do it with a web component, and I thought that might be a fun thing to do today. Real quick, before we dive in, this seems like the kind of thing that you find interesting. You might really enjoy some of the workshops and courses available over at leanwebclub.com. Most notably, my JavaScript Essentials course is really great for folks who are new to JavaScript and web development. It's going to give you over the course of 8 to 12 weeks, you're going to get a bunch of little lessons and then a template and a project to work on, and an open canvas, kind of like what we're doing today, where you can play around with some things and try to build it. If you get stuck along the way, I walk you through how I built it. And I also have open office hours every other week where you can join me and ask questions and get help. If you feel stuck, you can also do that in my Discord channel. But if you really want some more like hands-on, let's walk through this together, I also have office hours. One last housekeeping item. If this sort of content is interesting and you want me to make more of it, please like the video, subscribe, leave a comment down below. YouTube loves that. It gets this in front of more people, and it helps me know that I should keep making more stuff like this. And if there's something you'd like to see me build, please suggest it down in the comments. Awesome. With that out of the way, let's get building. So I've got my pick at random element, and the first thing we're going to do is define our web components. We're going to go custom elements. It would help if I spelled it right. Custom elements define, and then we're going to say pick at random. So just if you're new to web components, custom elements define is how you convert just a plain old custom element into a web component with interactivity. So you start by defining it. You pass its name in as a string. And as a reminder, web component names have to have at least one dash in them. Single word elements are considered, or those are namespace reserved for browser native elements. So a custom element should have at least one dash in it. And then we're going to go class extends, and we're going to extend the HTML element class. And if we jump in here, the next thing we're going to do is create a constructor method on our class. This, when you use custom elements define, it will automatically instantiate this constructor on every custom element of that name that you have on the page. In it, the very first thing you have to do is run the super method, and this inherits the parent class properties, so everything associated with that HTML element. And let's also document this. So instantiate the component. We don't need that. And real quick, just to make sure I didn't typo anything, because I do that a lot, we're going to log running into the console just to make sure this works. So let's jump in here. Let's beef the font up a little bit on this. And cool. So we're off to the races. We're working. That's great. So I think the first thing I want to do here is render some HTML into the DOM here. So I'm going to say this inner HTML equals. So we're going to render our initial HTML. Now, in a lot of web component tutorials, you're going to see people do things like create a shadow DOM and start injecting HTML in there. A lot of that comes from approaching web components the way you would approach like a React or a Vue component, where you want to keep everything super encapsulated and out of the main DOM and isolated and super scoped. I actually think that's an anti-pattern. I recommend against that. Putting things in the shadow DOM makes them harder to target, can create some accessibility issues if you do it wrong. Although I guess that's generally true for accessibility anyways. And it, more importantly, makes things way, way, way harder to style. So my default is to put everything in the light DOM, just the regular DOM. I actually think using the shadow DOM is an anti-pattern, and I am hard-pressed to come up with reasons to do it or situations where you'd like to. I'm sure they exist. In my opinion, that is an outlier, not the norm. So for this, I'm going to use template literals because they make it easier to create HTML strings. You don't have to worry about escaping quotes and things like that. So the first thing I want to do is add a form. Now, you don't need a form element to have inputs in your DOM. But it can be really helpful because it allows you to catch both keyboard events on the inputs themselves and keyboard events on the button and clicks on the button. It just makes it much easier to capture the users trying to submit a thing. So I like to wrap everything in a form, even though you technically don't need to. One other thing, we want to have an ID we want to have an ID on our input so that we can associate our label with it. But we want to make sure that if someone has more than one element on the page, we're not duplicating that element. So I think one of the first things we should do is create a unique ID for the instance. So we're going to say this UUID equals, and then I forget how to do this. So hold on, GMT UUID. I gotta look this up. So here we go. So crypto random UUID is going to generate a random string. So we will do that now. And then we can use it inside our thing here. And actually, let's, just to make sure it's a valid ID, let's go pick dash and then our random ID here. So it'll always start with the word pick. That way, just because IDs, sometimes this will spit out an output that starts with numbers, and IDs technically have to start with a letter. So just to avoid any kind of weird issues there, we'll just throw some letters in front of it. Cool. So we can say for equals, and then we will add this UUID, and we will say add an item. And then the input is going to have an ID of, and again, say this UUID, and type equals text. And finally, we want to add an unordered list that we will eventually style, but right now it's just going to be empty. And then let's get our elements. So we're going to say this form equals this query selector form, and this, I guess we'll call it the list, equals this query selector list. And just to double check again that everything is working the way it should, we'll log those into the console. We'll jump over. So I'm getting my form. The list doesn't exist. Let's see. Yeah, because I typed this list. That's not what I'm looking for. There we go. Cool. This is why I always check, because I screw this stuff up. One thing we're missing in here is button. So we're gonna, I guess we'll say add item, right? Cool. Yeah. There we go. Everything's looking great. Cool. And then the last thing I guess we're going to want to do for right now is, let's say this form equals, this form add event listener, submit this. So listen for form submissions. Now you may recall this from some of my other videos. If you haven't, I'm going to explain what's going on here. So with the add event listener method, normally you would pass a callback function in as the second argument. If you want, you can instead pass in an object, And if that object has a handle event method on it, the add event listener method will run that handle event method and pass in the event object to it instead of a callback function. And because classes, like the one we're using for our custom element here, our web component, are also objects, we can do it. And the nice thing about this approach is inside the handle event method, you maintain your context for this. So I will have access to the UUID, the form, the list, etc. So it makes it a little bit easier for me to do things. So let's go ahead and add our handle event method now. So handle event, we're going to pass in the event, and we'll say handle events. This may change, so for right now, we'll just say handle events. We don't need to specify the submit event. This is the event object, and console log submitted. Again, just want to test that everything is working. So item. Oh yeah, I reloaded the page. So let's go event prevent default. Okay, we'll go back. We'll reload the page. There we go, and add item. Cool. All right, we're in business. So now we're actually ready to, let's see, stop the form from reloading the page. Now we're ready to do fun stuff. So every time someone submits an item, we want to get the text from it. We want to add a list item to our unordered list, and we probably want to clear out the form. So let's add one last property here. We'll say this field query selector, and then we're going to look for. Well, actually, I guess we could technically look for this ID, couldn't we? So we'll go pound this UUID. One other thing I suppose we could do, we could just say form input, right? That'll also work. That's probably not form. It's got to be this form. Yeah, so we could also do that. So what we're going to do is, let's say, create a list item. So we'll say let li equal document create element li li text content equals this field value, and then this list append li. And so when I do this, what should happen? So let's reload. We're gonna say let's say I want to pick fruits. So we're going to say apple. I want to pick fruit. That's funny. Apple, pear, and orange. So every time I do this, we're getting a new item in our list. Awesome. Cool. So the next thing we want to do when we do this is we want to clear our list so that the user can do it again. So let's say clear text from field. So we'll say this field value equals. So we'll wipe it out. Cool. So let's say, how do we want to do this? Let's say apple, orange, pear. Perfect. So now we're getting wiped out. We can add a new item. One other thing we want to do, just from an accessibility perspective, we want to add some items to our list, and then we want to have them, or no, sorry, not to our list. We want to add a notification for our user, and then we also want that notification to disappear after some period of seconds. We don't want it to hang around. So let's say GMT just in time. Notifications. Is that here? That might actually be on the Lean Web Club. So let's do a search here. Okay, so we're going to say just in time notifications. Okay. Somewhere in here, I am pretty sure I have. So let's just look for notifications. That's probably the best way to do it. I guess it might be this. Status messages. Here we go. It's in this section. Short-lived, just-in-time status messages. Cool. So we've got a little helper function here to do this. I'm going to take this, I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to drop it in here. So we will say show status, but we don't need the function there. We're just going to show a status. So we're going to, the way this works, I'll explain it here. We are creating a div. We're adding aria live equals polite to it. We could also give it instead like role equals status. That also works. And then we are going to append it to the form. And then we're going to set some text content on it. Let's add an argument for that, right? So show a status message in the form. This is going to be a string. The message to display. So we'll set text content to message. Now, if you're wondering why this is happening inside a set timeout, with this kind of situation here where we're adding role equals status, what this is going to do, this is going to tell screen readers, hey, the content in here is going to change. When it does, announce it. That element needs to be in the DOM before the text changes or it won't get announced. So we append it into the DOM and then we add our text. And then after, let's say 4 seconds, we remove the notification from the DOM. So now we can show a status message and we can say this show status. And let's say, we need to do this before we clear the field. So we will say, we're going to go, this field value has been added to the list. And let's put it in quotes like that. Cool. So if we jump back over, let's go apple, orange, and pear. Perk, I spelled it wrong. That's okay. But you can see the notifications are disappearing after some period of time. We can also, we can style these things, right? So we can say pick at random, role equals status, and then we could do something like padding equals like this, and let's give it a background color maybe, right, of just like a light gray. Maybe we'll even give it a border color. Let's say border 1 pic solid E5, 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 and let's go border radius equals 1em. Cool. And then I guess if we're going to be doing this, should we also, we'll get to that later. We'll do some styling of the form later, right? But so now you can see we do something like, so we'll add apple, pear, orange, right? And it just provides a little bit of a way to kind of differentiate them. I don't like that border radius. It's too big. Obviously, the point of this is not necessarily to style, but let's also add a margin bottom of 0.5 rem. That way there's just a little bit of a gap between them. And we will also pick it random form, not form. Let's see. What do we want to do here? Ooh, you know what we can do? Let's do this. We will go margin top. There we are. So apple, pear, banana. There we go. There's a good one. Cool. So now we got a little bit of a gap. That's good. It gets added. It gets removed. It gets announced to screen readers. Perfect. So we've got our list. That's awesome. The next thing we probably want to be able to do is announce the list, right? So give someone the ability to actually pick one of the items, right? So one other thing we probably need to do here is we are going to, we're going to add, let's make this a paragraph just to give it a little bit of space. And we'll add a button here, button. So we're going to say pick an item. And to make this stand out, how do we want to do this? So let's give this let's give it an attribute of pick, right? Or let's say pick item. That way we know what it is. We can find it in the DOM. And finally, after this element, we're going to add a div with a role equals, do I want to say role equals status? No, let's say Aria Live equals polite. This is where we're going to actually inject our result. So we'll say pick result. We'll just give that an attribute so we can style it later if we want to. And let's add these to the list. So we're going to say this pick button equals this query selector. We'll go pick item. So I'm using an attribute selector here to get this. Pass it in brackets, and we can target it. And then we're going to say this result equals this query selector pick result. It would help if I spelt those correctly. Cool. So now we're going to change this to listen for events. We're also going to listen for click events. And we are going to update the way our handle event method works. I also want to move this. So let's move this down here. Okay. So I'm going to take everything that's in here and I'm going to move this into on submit. So we'll do this. And then we can say handle submit events. Copy that over. And in here, we are going to say this on event type event. So I'm automating. Someone actually mentioned this in the comment on my last video. Like, what would you do if there was more than one event type? We get to see that now. So I am, what I'm doing here is I'm getting the event type and I'm basically saying inside our class, run the on event type method and pass in the event as an argument. So now we get automatic event routing. So I've got on submit. For the next one, I'm going to say on click event, and we can say handle click events. All right, event. I should have just copy pasted this, but you know, whatever. We're flying by the seat of our pants here. Cool. So now we can actually pick an item at random from the list. So inside here, we are going to get all of the list items. So we'll say let items equal, and then we'll say this list query selector all li. So that's going to get all of the list items. We want to get the text value of those items. So to do that, let's use, we're going to do this. We're going to turn our node list that query selector all returns into an array. And then we're going to use the map function to create a new array. So we will, in here, we'll say function item. And so for each item, we're going to return item text content. Okay, so let's break this down. So query selector all gets a node list of items. Array from converts that node list into an array. The array map method creates a new array from an old array, transforming each item in the array into something different. So for each list item in our array, we're going to get the text content of it and use that as the new value for the item at that same index in the array. So if we were to console log items, we should have an array of items. So let's say apple, orange, pear, Oh, and I see what's happening because I'm listening on the document instead of the button, aren't I? Let's see. Yeah, no, I'm listening on the form. That's not right. Pick button. There we go. Okay, cool. So apple, orange, pear. And now you can see we've got this array with apple, orange, pear. The next thing we want to do is shuffle that array. Now, JavaScript doesn't have a native shuffle method the way a lot of other programming languages do. So I actually have a helper function for that over at the Lean Web Club that I am going to steal. I use it all the time. There's lots of ways you can do this, including with math random. I like this one because it uses the Fisher-Yates algorithm, which is more random than some of the other methods you can use for shuffling things. So let's jump in here and we are going to, I guess we'll drop this down at the bottom. We'll say shuffle. We pass in an array. We return the array back out, although you really don't need to do that because this shuffles arrays in place. So we will randomize the items. So we'll say shuffle items. And then inside our, what do we call that? Result. So inside our result, we can say this result text content equals, and then we'll say you picked, and then we will use items 0. So we'll grab the first item from our list, and we'll display it as the result. Show the result. And it's going to be random every time because this is just scrambling the items in the array. So if we jump over here, we'll say apple, orange, banana, pear, pick item, shuffle is not defined. That's correct. I need to say this shuffle. And now I need to type all these items back in. Apples, orange, pear, banana. I really don't need banana. I just want the extra item in there. The button moved on me twice. Okay. This is not running. Why is that? This result, because text is not the right property here. It's text content. 99% of my my coding challenges are typos. Let's see. Apple, orange, pear, banana. And you picked pear, apple, banana, apple. So you might occasionally get the same item multiple times because it's random. So sometimes that happens. Just like sometimes when you roll a die, you get the same number multiple times. Cool. So we're getting a result now, which is cool. I'm going to do this actually. I'm going to go, you know what? Yeah, for right now, I think I'm going to set this to role equals status as well, maybe, just so that we get that same styling. That would be nice. In a real application, I might have these kind of styled differently. Oh no, I don't want that. Okay. Here's what we can do, right? So we're going to say not empty. Yeah, there we go. Cool. All right. So apple, there's only going to be one option here. Yeah. So you can see once the item has a value in it, it shows up. Again, if you're confused by what just happened here, not is a pseudo selector that says do this thing when this condition isn't true with a set of selectors. And for that selector, I'm using the pseudo selector of empty, which applies to an element when it has nothing in it. Cool. All right. So we're picking items. We're displaying them. They're getting read aloud. They're getting announced to screen readers. Additions are getting announced to screen readers. There's a lot of different things we could probably do, like adding more items, or not adding more items, saving items so that they're there when you come back, maybe in local storage, clearing items out of the list, and even customizing things like what the label and the button text and pick an item, what all those say. So I am going to save all of that for the next video. So we're going to take this app and we're going to build it out even further because I feel like we're getting a little long here. So we'll come back and we'll tackle this next week. If you found this video interesting, do me a favor, like, subscribe, leave a comment. Let me know what else you'd like me to build. and I can do that next time. It helps me grow the channel, helps YouTube show this to other people. So I really appreciate it. And if you want to build more stuff like this and you want some hands-on help from me, head over to leanwebclub.com where you can sign up today for free and get access to a whole ton of tutorials, courses, workshops, and my office hours and more. Hope to see you there, and I'll catch you next time. Cheers.